Netflix's Hollywood, as well as HBO's Bad Education, get reviews as AMC picks a fight with NBCUniversal, and much, much more. I'm Joe Acierno. This is Real Talk. Okay, now before I get into one of the world's biggest movie theater chains picking a fight with one of the world's biggest media conglomerate companies, if you haven't yet, or if you haven't been here before, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe and hit the bell for notifications on all new content. And also, don't forget to check out the social media profiles I've created for this particular show in the description section below. Now, within the last week or so, AMC announced that they weren't going to be showing any films from Universal Pictures in any of their theaters. Now, why would they make such a move? This comes after the video-on-demand success of Trolls World Tour, and NBCUniversal CEO Jeff Shell announced that he plans to release more films from the company in both theaters and video-on-demand. Well, like I said, AMC didn't like that so much, so now they made a statement recently banning Universal films from playing in any of their theaters when they finally decide to reopen too. Now, of course, Universal is no joke. Some of their notable content, as well as upcoming releases, includes the Candyman sequel, anything from DreamWorks Animation, the Blumhouse horror films such as Halloween Kills, the upcoming Halloween sequel, same with the Jurassic World franchise. You have Jurassic World 3 coming out within the next year or so, and of course this includes the Fast and Furious franchise, a huge money-making franchise. Fast and Furious 9 was recently pushed back all the way to May of 2021 because of concerns with the coronavirus, so this is a pretty ballsy move from AMC, considering the fact that they're barely managing to keep afloat. I think that a lot of people are familiar with the fact that AMC was flirting with bankruptcy within the last couple of weeks, again, in large part due to the coronavirus, how they haven't really been able to stay open because of all the concerns with the disease. Now, I see why AMC wants to do something like this. Coming from someone who enjoys going to the movies, likes making a night out of it, and very much enjoys the theater experience, and I really hope that doesn't die out following the dust settling from everything with COVID-19. AMC, I'm going to be honest, this is such a stupid move on their part. They are not in the position to do this. They recently just had to raise $500 million in debt just to be able to function through this coming Thanksgiving weekend when they do finally open up again. Again, I see their intention, I see where they're coming from, but they are not in a position to do so. If they didn't have the financial problems they were having, yeah, I would understand them picking a fight with NBCUniversal of all companies, but that doesn't change the fact that they are still having the problems that they're having, that them opening up is still such a huge gamble considering their financial problems, considering everything going on with COVID-19. So, I mean, again, to AMC's credit, they are willing to negotiate. The statement released from the company's CEO did say that they are open to negotiations. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Who do you think fucked up more, AMC or NBCUniversal? And just to cap off the story, IGN is cited for this report. Okay, just a brief story before I get into the first review of today's show. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences recently announced their waiving of the theatrical release rule in order for films to qualify at next year's Academy Awards. For those of you who don't know, the Academy has a requirement for films to be screened in theaters in certain areas for a certain amount of time before it can actually qualify for the Academy Awards. But in light of everything going on with the coronavirus pandemic, and since so many films that originally had planned theatrical releases have been going straight to video on demand, so that way people actually get a chance to see the movie, the Academy decided to waive that rule, at least for this year, it seems, until further notice. But the stipulation is that in order to qualify, you had to have had a theatrical release already planned. So, for example, the next Judd Apatow film, The King of Staten Island, following the semi-autobiographical story of comedian Pete Davidson, that film was originally slated to be released in theaters on June 19th of this year. But it recently went to video on demand, where it was recently announced that it was going straight to video on demand on June 12th. so skipping the theatrical release. But since it already had a theatrical release planned, it can indeed qualify for next year's Academy Awards. But just giving you an example of a situation where a film wouldn't qualify, the film that I'm going to review on the show today, Bad Education, that film never had a theatrical release planned, so this film will instead contend for the Emmy Awards next year. Alright, so Bad Education is the newest film from HBO Films, and it follows a prominent public school superintendent as he turns to extreme measures in order to prevent an embezzlement scheme from turning into a public scandal. It's based on the magazine article The Bad Superintendent by Robert Kolker, which just so happens to be based on the real-life scandal of the Roslyn High School District in 2002, and is directed by Corey Finley, adapted for the screen by Mike Mikowski, and stars Hugh Jackman, Allison Janney, Geraldine Viswanathan, and Ray Romano. I recently just got a free trial from HBO just so I could watch this film. We don't have HBO in my house, and now I think about it, I should probably cancel that free trial so that way I don't end up getting charged automatically. But I thought this film was riveting from start to finish. There's a lot that this movie has going for it. The performances across the board are absolutely terrific. Hugh Jackman, I think this is honestly one of the best performances of his entire career, and he disappears into this role. And as I've said before with so many performances, it's very hard when you have someone that's as well known as Hugh Jackman and you're able to identify him on the screen for this movie as the superintendent that he plays, Frank Tassone, as instead of just assuming or identifying him as Hugh Jackman. And I think this just goes to show, from playing the role of Wolverine for 18 years to Jean Valjean in Les Miserables to now this role, which is absolutely captivating. And I think it just shows the range of an actor that he has. I think he's just an all-around wonderful performer. He plays Frank Tassone, which is the superintendent at the center of this entire scandal. And Frank Tassone is realized as this very charming person. You don't want to believe the shady sort of things that he does. There's an insane likability about him, but I don't want to say too much. But watching his character unravel throughout the entire film was very engaging, and it was kind of surprising. And I don't want to say, like I said, I don't want to say too much, but you don't want to believe some of the things that he does, and when you end up doing it, and once you finally end up coming to terms with the fact that he does certain things, he has a bigger role than he wants to let on in this entire scandal, it's kind of shocking. But it's like a slow shock. It's not an immediate surprise. It's one of those things where you really think about it and you think to yourself like, wow, I'm honestly kind of surprised that he was involved to the extent that he was in all of this. Allison Janney, she's one of my favorite actresses working today. She's a terrific performer. She's excellent in this film, and I'm looking forward to seeing more from her. I've really liked her ever since I started watching her on The West Wing, and the fact that she's had such great success in both television and in film. She won an Academy Award for her role in I, Tonya, first time nomination. She's a terrific actress, and this movie is no exception. Ray Romano, he's someone I've loved ever since Everybody Loves Raymond. It's my favorite TV show of all time. A lot of actors, when they're on sitcoms for as long as they are, usually get typecasted, or they just don't get a wide range of great roles following the end of whatever show they were on, but that hasn't been the case with Ray Romano. He was recently in Martin Scorsese's The Irishman, fantastic movie, and he was solid as Bob Buffalino. And before that, he was in The Big Sick, and he plays the would-be father-in-law, or the father of Kumail Nanjiani's character's girlfriend. And I'm going to be honest with you, I loved him in that movie. I thought he was robbed of an Oscar nomination. That was a film where I was opened up more to the range that Ray Romano has as a performer. And he's terrific in this movie as well. He plays Big Bob Spicer, another administrator caught in the middle of the scandal as well. One of the big things that this film has going for it is the storytelling, and it's mostly in not only the dialogue, the razor-sharp conversations that all the characters seem to have with each other, but again, the characterization. I talked about Frank Tassone already, and watching his character unravel was such a big draw for me in this film. But what I like about this film is that none of the real-life characters in this film, or how they're portrayed in this film, none of them ever feel like, cartoons or like caricatures. This all feels very realistic, very down to earth, but at the same time, just very captivating and very tense. And building on that tension too, I think that has a lot to do with the work of the director, Corey Finley. The tension isn't always like in your face, but it's very subtle. But at the same time, it still punches very hard. There's one scene where one of the nieces of the main culprit of the embezzlement scheme tries to blackmail Frank Tassone, and just like I said, the very subtle tension, nothing like really blows up, but at the same time, the words that they use or that Frank uses to kind of just disarm this person trying to blackmail him is kind of shocking. But at the same time, it's very gripping. It was one of those things where like, wow, that didn't blow up. It didn't blow up on the screen, but it kind of sent that sizzling feeling throughout my spine. Like, wow, I can't believe I just saw that, and I can't believe he just smacked her down so hard without losing his cool, without anyone losing his cool, his or her cool, in a very dramatic fashion. And to more of the credit of the director, this film does take place in Long Island of 2002. Now, there are a couple ways that I felt very immersed in this film, which I think is the main key as to how you know a director has done his or her job very well. When you feel like you're a fly on the wall, you're in the world of the movie. I felt like I was in the world of this movie, and coming from someone who, again, was born and raised in Long Island, there are a few things that I noticed. One was the accents of all the people, of all the characters in this movie, and I noticed, and I thought to myself, is that what we all sound like? I mean, I'm not insulting her or anything like that. It was kind of eye opening. I gotta ask my friends who aren't from Long Island the next time I see them, like, is that how I sound? Like like exactly like in Bad Education? But they probably didn't see this movie, so they're gonna be like, Joe, what the hell are you talking about? But no, I thought that was a nice key, and again, it never felt forced. It never felt like they were trying too hard to pull you in. And even then, too, whether it comes to the establishing shots of certain Long Island suburbs, to one of the characters in the movie, she has to go into the city to do some investigation into the embezzlement. She hops on, there's a shot of her hopping on the Long Island Railroad, and I'm like, oh my God, I used to do that every day before I got put on furlough. So there's a lot of draws for me in this movie. And if there's one thing that I guess that I didn't like, or I guess just didn't meet my expectations, there aren't like a lot of very explosive scenes in this movie, and when it comes to crime stories, for whatever reason, I just have this expectation, but at the same time, this was never really that was never a bad thing. So, all in all, I thought this movie was absolutely thrilling from start to finish. I'm going to give this a 93. And I want to know exactly what your thoughts are on this movie in the comment section below. Is my opinion on point? Do you agree with my analysis? Am I overhyping this movie just a bit too much? Don't be shy in the comment section below, or if you're listening to this on a podcast, check out the social media pages that I have in the description. If you're listening to this on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and don't be afraid to comment on the post for those particular social media pages. And if you like what you're hearing so far, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe, hit the bell to get notifications, and also to follow the social media pages that I have listed in the description. Now, moving forward, Disney announced they're giving their interpretation of Hercules the live-action treatment, and it's set with the Russo brothers to produce, the visionaries behind Avengers Infinity War, Endgame, and I also believe they did Captain America Civil War, if I'm not mistaken. They're currently set to produce. They're not on board to direct, at least at the moment. I have an odd feeling that there's going to be a push to get them to direct, because there hasn't been an announcement as far as who's directing the film, as far as I know. But I would like to see them direct the film as well. They obviously have a lot of experience working with superpowered heroes, so I want to see if they're allowed to take everything that makes a superhero and bring in the human factor, that like they did so well with all the Avengers movies, with a couple of the Captain America films. It's not certain yet how loyal this interpretation of Hercules will be to the original 1997 film, especially with the musical sequences. There hasn't been an announcement as far as whether or not the musical numbers are actually going to be included in the film. And I'm going to be honest, even though that isn't certain, I can still see this being a good live-action adaptation, depending on the approach that they go. if they go for a more mature and a grittier adaptation in comparison to the original 1997 Hercules film, like they seem to be doing with Mulan, the live-action interpretation of that 1998 film, because Mulan was actually the first live-action Disney film that's based on one of their animated films to get a PG-13 rating. So it's obvious that they're going for a much grittier interpretation as far as that particular story, and I think Hercules would be served well served to be taken in that direction as well. But again, let me know what you think as far as Hercules getting the live action treatment. Do you think it's necessary? Do you think that it just doesn't need to happen? Are you tired of the Disney live action adaptations? Don't be afraid to comment in the comment section below. And just to end this off, the Hollywood Reporter is cited for the findings with this particular story. Now, just some sad news before I cap off the show with a review of Netflix's Hollywood. International actor Irrfan Khan, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, passed away this past Thursday from a colon infection. The actor, born on January 7th, 1967, rose to fame in Indian cinema, but what separated him most from a lot of other Indian actors is the prominence that he achieved outside of Indian cinema. He made a name for himself in both American and British cinema as well. Now, even though this career of his wasn't one that I followed as closely, I realized just how much of a supporting staple that he was in a lot of other films that I enjoyed once I found out about him passing away, unfortunately. He was the cop interrogating Jamal in Slumdog Millionaire. He was the owner of the park in Jurassic World, who took up the mantle from John Hammond, played by David Attenborough, if I'm not mistaken. And most importantly, he played the adult version of Pi Patel in Life of Pi. Now, as I said, he was born on January 7th, 1967. Passed away this past Thursday, unfortunately, at the young age of 53 from a colon infection. But at least the impact that he seemed to have on a lot of people, his memory will live on much longer. So I want you guys to comment below, any favorite movie moments of yours from the actor's career if you followed his career more closely than I have. Okay, coming from the creators of Glee is Netflix's newest miniseries titled Hollywood. The show follows young dreamers as they pay whatever price necessary to make their motion picture dreams come to life in post-World War II Tinseltown. The show is created by Ryan Murphy and Ian Brennan and has a giant cast of players that stars David Corenswet, Dylan McDermott, Darren Criss, Laura Harrier, Samara Weaving, Patti LuPone, Jeremy Pope, Jake Picking, Holland Taylor, Joe Mantello, and Jim Parsons. Now, my expectations going into the show, considering all the mixed reviews that the show was given before it started its release, my expectations were kind of low, considering all that. The reviews were a bit mixed going into the show. That being said, since my expectations were kind of low, I ended up enjoying the show so much more than I thought I would. Now, this is by no means a perfect show, but it has a lot more going for it than I originally would have thought. Now, this show, a lot of the show centers around sex and sexual promiscuity and hiding sexual orientation. So my first word of advice to anyone thinking about watching this show, don't watch it if you're a prude. If that kind of thing throws you off or makes you uncomfortable, this is definitely not the show for you. But going on to the things that I did like, one of the things that works so well about this show is the cast. The performances across the board are absolutely terrific. There are some, in my mind, that stand out just a bit more than others, but there's by no means a weak link anywhere in this giant ensemble. And I think that says a lot, considering how many moving parts there are in this particular cast, that all of them are so strong. I think that says a lot about the effort that went into the show on the part of everybody involved. Now, just because the performances, just a couple performances in my mind that stand out the most. There's David Corenswet, who plays Jack Costello, this World War II vet trying to make it as an actor. And going back to the sexual promiscuity part of the story, Jack starts working at a gasoline station that also operates as a kind of male prostitution ring for a lot of the Hollywood elite players during this time. So Jack, of course, is very conflicted about doing the things that he needs to do in order to make a living for his wife and babies that are on the way back at home. And again, even though his choices, even though his morality, there's a great moral debate inside of Jack Costello that maybe he doesn't make all the choices that he necessarily agrees with. They're still at his core a good guy, and it made me very much root for him. And I don't know if I can say empathize, but definitely sympathize with him a bit. I liked watching his character go through all the motions that come with trying to make your dream come true very much. There's Jeremy Pope as Archie Goldman. Archie is trying to make it as a screenwriter in Hollywood, but of course, considering how this is the 1940s and he's not only both black and gay, it's a double whammy for this particular time period. His struggle, unfortunately, is amplified that much more, but it doesn't necessarily, for the most part, I can honestly say that I definitely rooted for him as well. I wanted for his dream to come true. His intentions were definitely coming from the right place, and it made me very much root for him as well. And then in terms of performances, not as much character, and I'll get to that in just a second, but in terms of performances, Jim Parsons plays real-life Hollywood agent Henry Wilson, and he is fantastic in this role. The role is, Henry Wilson is portrayed in the show as a total killer. This very blunt, almost brutish kind of guy, and the fact that it's very weird. There isn't a very masculine energy to Henry Wilson, but at the same time, like I said, there's this very vicious and ruthless nature to him as well. And coming off of a performance such as The Big Bang Theory, where I guess Sheldon Cooper was very much set in his ways and very determined. He didn't have necessarily the tenacity that Henry Wilson exudes in this particular show, and this is a role that I see very much as a role and a performance that I see very much as a big leap forward for Jim Parsons in terms of his abilities as an actor. Now, there's a lot of emotion that goes into the show. There's a huge heart to it all. And even though there are times where things come off as a bit cheesy, this is one of those shows where at times I am very happy that I wasn't lactose intolerant or that I could have maybe enjoyed a glass of wine while watching the show. That's how cheesy the show ends up being in a lot of ways, but that doesn't mean that I didn't necessarily feel anything in the heartstrings. There's, like I said, the vast majority of these characters, you really want them to succeed. And I very much felt like that's one of the biggest draws for the story, especially considering how long the show ends up being. The show is just in total, about 6 hours long. Now, like I said, with the show being as long as it is, there's a lot of moving parts to the story. And as much as I enjoyed, for the most part, the moving parts of the story, all of that coming together kind of made it feel convoluted and messy. But again, that just because it all feels convoluted and messy doesn't mean that I wasn't completely invested in as to what was going on. Another thing that works very well with the show is the characterization for the most part. Again, I cared very much about the vast majority of these people getting what they wanted, all their personalities, all their complexities, all their motivations. My favorite characters, like I said, was David Corenswet as Jack Costello. You have Ernie West, the owner of the gas station that Jack starts out working at, played by Dylan McDermott. You have Raymond Ainsley, who is another aspiring filmmaker, and again, giving his dreams and ambitions and the way he goes about trying to make his vision as a filmmaker come to life in this particular time. That's something I can empathize with very much. He's played by Darren Criss, who's very solid in the role as well. And then Dick Samuels, who's played by Joe Mantello. I liked him very much as well. Now, like I was saying before about the Henry Wilson character, not the performance, but the character, there's a lot of complexity to him. And I was very much intrigued by that complexity, but at the same time, I was a little confused as to how I was supposed to feel about him, how the show wanted me to feel about him. Because in real life, and not only in the show, but in real life, Henry Wilson was a bit of a sexual predator who often coerced or, I guess, lured up-and-coming actors into sexual relationships because he, too, was a latent homosexual. And, of course, this shows him being very manipulative with the kind of power that he has. And again, just the way that he goes about treating people. And I was very confused as to how I was supposed to feel about him, considering how he's also portrayed as this person trying to achieve his dream as well. And I'm like, okay, am I supposed to sympathize with him in this quest to get his dream, I'm honestly not sure. But at the same time, I can't say he wasn't an interesting character to watch. And again, that's in large part due to the fantastic portrayal by Jim Parsons. Now, and on the visual end, there's a very glossy look to it all. And I looked at the production design and the costume design, and it's all very convincing. It's all very immersive. And one of the first things that I thought to myself as I was watching the show, and I'm noticing all this, is, wow, this is an expensive this is an expensive show. But again, I think it all ended up paying off very well in that department. Now, just a couple other things that I didn't like. When it comes to the exploration of sex, everything having to do with the show, while, yeah, I think it was a good instinct on the part of the show to portray all of the sexual promiscuity that went on in Hollywood, and honestly still probably goes on now. There are times where the show, I felt like, tried a little bit too hard to be raunchy. Not that it was too raunchy, it tried too hard to be raunchy. So again, that's something I've noticed just a bit more towards the end of watching a show. Like, it kind of, I don't know if I'd say, I guess it kind of gets exhausting after a while. But again, that doesn't really drag down the show too much. But I think one of the things that the show is very flawed in is the overall ending. There's something that felt very, like I said, very cheesy about it. It just felt kind of rushed to wrap up certain character stories. There's a marriage proposal in there that kind of felt like it was coming out of nowhere, and the marriage proposal is between two characters whose romantic dynamic I was rooting for, and I did very much want to happen. But at the same time, it all did feel kind of rushed in a way. So I guess it just didn't do it for me as much, capping that all off. There's a character death in there that I felt kind of came out of nowhere, whereas it's very weird in how they were originally building up one character death, it seemed, but that character doesn't end up dying, and if someone else dies instead. So it seemed like they were trying a little too hard to subvert expectations where it didn't necessarily make sense to. And like I said, it's a bit cheesy. Particularly, there's an Oscar sequence at the end that overall made it feel too Hollywood, a little bit too preachy as far as all the themes of acceptance and tolerance that it was trying to portray. And again, not to necessarily say that the themes of acceptance and tolerance aren't at least well-intentioned, that aren't at least justified. The way that the show goes about not portraying them, not only in the ending, but throughout the entire duration of the show as well, it all felt a little bit too heavy-handed, at least for my tasting. And again, just the ending overall felt a little too Hollywood, quote-unquote, but at least to the show's credit, they did title the final episode of the show a Hollywood ending. So I guess it's not like it was false advertising. But overall, I ended up enjoying the show so much more than I thought I would. Even though it's not perfect, there are times where it feels very campy. I very much rooted for the vast majority of the people. I was very much invested into what was going on with this show. So overall, I'm going to give the show a B+. And I'd like for you to... There's a debate that I would like to start in here. The show definitely takes a little bit of the more idealistic revisionist history approach to telling the story, because it does take place during, a real time in history. It basically tries to go, the approach of what if you could rewrite the story. And it makes me wonder to myself, okay, I could see wanting to rewrite the story, but is it healthy? Is it constructive to be so fixated on rewriting the past, again, revising history, because you can't just change the history that you don't like, So I want you guys to talk about this in the comment section below, or even comment in terms of the on the social media pages that I've set up for the show. What do you think of the show's sort of revisionist history approach to all these characters and their dreams coming true? I'd like to know exactly what you think. But yeah, that's all I have for you today on Real Talk. And I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't gotten a chance to, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications. Don't forget to take a look at the social media pages that you can find in the descriptions. If you're not watching this on YouTube, if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can check out the show's social media pages that I have in the descriptions there as well. So, all in all, thanks for tuning in. I'm Joe Acierno. This has been Real Talk.